For as long as I can remember, words haven't been my thing. I don't think they ever were. I'm not able to explain how I'm feeling the way I wish I could, especially when I don't know how I'm feeling or how to explain it with words. But with art, I can. With art, I've always been able to make whatever I needed, whether that was some imaginary place I would make to escape life and the trauma I was facing at the time, or it was a literal expression of how I'm feeling or what I've been through. Art for me is ever changing. It's always becoming something new or ready to become something new. It's not stuck in one way, and as much as I claim to hate change, I need it in my art. I wouldn't be able to fully function without it, because going through the trauma, I needed art to cope, and I still use it years later to cope. And through that time, I've changed greatly, and so my art has changed along with me. I wasn't like most kids who knew whether or not they liked art from an early age. I only truly discovered my passion for it around grade 6, because up until then I was under the impression that you had to be technically skilled at painting or drawing to be good at it, which of course is not true, but I didn't know that at the time. My love for art started when I started making art for a purpose. I started by making this place I'd like to call Happy Town. I made these as an escape. I'd get lost in these drawings in my imagination, and I could go back to it whenever I needed. It was this perfect dream world where people were happy, and where I could be happy. Once I finally escaped the trauma and got away from it, I no longer needed that distraction, that escape. It became about finding a safe place where I could express myself and my pain as openly and as honestly as I needed. So that was it, my safe place. And for a while, I made that expressive work. I made what I needed with no fear of being judged, but slowly and inevitably time ran out for that, at which point I felt completely and utterly lost. I had just came to ESA and hit an art block after having made my first project, my common object project. I found that I really liked it, not because of this new medium, but because this was the first genuinely thought through concept I'd ever worked with. And once this piece was done, I was stuck between who I was and who I needed to be. I tried to force myself into making the work that I'd used to make, which in the end only made things harder for me and delayed the inevitable. After that, it took a while to actually figure out what's next, but after some trial and error, I figured it out. And my art evolved into these works about trauma in general. They're these concepts that you can apply to most traumas. This now allowed my art not just to be for me, but for anyone, specifically those who've endured a traumatic experience of some kind. The first series that I made was my Rebuilt series. In it, I have a different color or shade for every piece, because we're all different. The way we react to things is different. The trauma itself is different. This series follows the concept of how a traumatic event rips you away. It tears you down, and for me, through my traumas, I lost multiple different versions of myself. So many different pieces of myself, and every time they were completely ripped away from me. It wasn't just a piece, it was all of me. Each trauma completely changed me. The Rebuilt series represents that, along with the healing. It represents being ripped away, losing yourself, and through time, through healing, you become someone new. Though you'll never be who you were again, nor will it be perfect, you still don't feel entirely whole. This series is something I've stepped back from a few times, thinking it was done, as well as I've taken multiple breaks from it. But each time I've gone back and made more. And even though I've always gone back to it, I find that I don't get fully consumed in it, not until I'm painting over the thread. Because even today I still feel that connection to painting. I still always try and find a way to include it in my art, because the work that I used to make, the work that used to consume me, doesn't anymore. It can't. Because no matter how much I want it, I don't need it. Which maybe is why I take these breaks from it, that I often spend trying to figure things out, doing research, or if I'm in a shutdown, I doodle. Next, we have the Altered Memories series, which all started one day because I was cleaning my room and I found this one small picture, that caused me flashbacks, panic attacks, and a shutdown for the next few days. But somehow, even mid-breakdown, I need to keep it. Of course, I got angry and I ripped it up, but somehow it still felt important. After a few days had passed and I'd talked to some people to figure out what to do next, and after some time in preparation, I was ready to look at it again. So I did, but I realized that I don't know half the people in this photo, even though I know I do, or at least I did. And then everything just clicked. I've read these books, I've done this research, I know that our memories can be altered and changed. It's not going to be as accurate as it was in the moment, or even as accurate as it was the night before when I'd had that nightmare. Because the more you think about a memory, the more inaccurate it becomes. For someone with PTSD, we are forced to relive that memory. We may look back and think it wasn't that bad, which of course is not true, or we may begin to forget details like what room it was in. These things change in our memories because we're all forced to relive it so much. Even though it's not intentional, it can come from things like flashbacks, nightmares, and all kinds of triggers. I truly can't even begin to imagine how differently I think of my trauma now as opposed to the day it happened. That's something I find so fascinating, something that we think we know, something that impacts our lives so greatly we don't fully remember. And of course, part of that is the trauma was black or the trauma, but the other parts are solely because of the time and the way memory worked. I made these two pieces with photos that contain both myself and those who play a large role in my trauma. But my third piece is about COVID because we are all affected by it. It's a global trauma. This specific piece I've made slightly different, as I've whited out all the people in it but left the masks, because this is a part of our collective history. And though many insignificant details will be forgotten, the image of the mask will be remembered. The way this series works is people of insignificance, things that have been forgotten, are whited out, and everything else is blurred to show the distortion in the memory. That's the evolution of my work, the evolution of me. I think that if I could go back in time and tell myself one thing, it's that I don't need to sit in the ball on my floor stressing because I've lost my work and therefore I've lost myself, because I haven't lost it. It just evolved. I've just evolved.